I was wiping puke off the tile when Jake rolled in wearing cologne. My dad was half conscious, shirt soaked in sweat, and Jake walked right past him like it was a dinner party, not a dying room. He bent down, kissed Dad's hand like he was visiting a pope, and said, "Hang in there, old man," then looked over at me and winked. I kept my mouth shut. That was my default. I just tossed the dirty towels in the hamper, squeezed out another dose of meds from the syringe, and watched Jake charm the air like cameras were rolling. My name's Martin Murphy. I'm 22. I live in Napa, California. Folks call me Marty, but my dad barely called me anything at all. Before we start, tell us which city or country you're listening from. Let's see which corners of the world we've gathered from today. Thanks. And now the story. My father, Richard Murphy, was the wine guy in Napa. Built his name like a monument. Owned cellars people toasted in French. But the second he got sick, it was me scrubbing his sheets and managing the feeding schedule while Jake played golden boy with his 10-minute visits. Mom, Vicky, hovered like a ghost. Always teary, always begging the hospice doctor for another miracle. "We can try that vitamin blend, can't we? What if we increase fluids?" She didn't look at me unless I was holding a tray. Dad, even on his worst days, found breath to insult me. "You're not built for the load," he mumbled once, right after I helped him to the toilet. Didn't say thank you. Just closed his eyes like I was a draft under a door he could ignore. But I didn't argue. I gave him his shots. I cleaned up the leaks. I turned him so his bed sores wouldn't split. I kept the peace, even when he acted like I was mold on the baseboard. Jake was 20, 2 years younger than me, but somehow the heir to everything. He needed the Lexus to get to his part-time gig. Needed money for a business trip. Needed more space in the garage for his golf clubs. Mom handed him envelopes like she didn't see the empty tequila bottles in the back seat. Then one night, Dad's pulse dropped while I was checking his line. I felt it stutter, then fall off a cliff. I gripped his wrist, counted, waited, but he didn't come back. His eyes opened just for a second. No anger this time, just tired. He exhaled 3 rough, uneven breaths. Then nothing. I shook his shoulder. "Dad?" Nothing. Just the oxygen machine humming like it didn't get the memo. I walked to the hall, leaned into Mom's room and said, "It's time." She stood, took 2 steps, and dropped to her knees like her strings got cut. I caught her under the arms before she cracked her chin on the floor. Jake texted an hour later, "Love you forever, Dad," from some lake house 2 counties away. That was it. The funeral smelled like lilies and money. Everyone wore sunglasses. Jake showed up late, posed like a movie poster, then peeled out the second the pastor said, "Amen." The lawyer scheduled the will reading for Tuesday. That night, I didn't sleep. Just sat on the couch, staring at the fridge hum and the stained carpet, listening to a quiet house that didn't feel like mine anymore. I told myself I'd take whatever came without whining, walk it off, stand up and keep going, start over, because no one was coming to rescue me. The lawyer read it like he was ordering lunch. Flat, bored voice, no pause between lines. Mom got the Napa house for the rest of her life. Jake got the business, 2 of the cars, the condo downtown, and the accounts. I got a rundown property out by the county line and a starter fund, with barely enough to cover 6 months of rent if I lived like a ghost. They didn't even say the property's name, just a parcel number and a line about family continuation per legacy structure. Jake was already swinging the new car keys on his finger like he'd won a game show. He clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Don't be a beggar, bro. Play your cards. You'll figure it out." Then he walked out like a man heading for a steak dinner. In the parking lot, Mom squeezed my hand and sniffled like she just woke up from a bad dream. "I didn't know it would be like this, Marty. I swear I didn't." Then she slid into Jake's back seat, the same seat I used to ride in as a kid, and stared straight ahead while he pulled away. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went back inside, asked the lawyer for the parcel file, and left without another word. I packed one duffel, just boots, jeans, and my shaving kit, and bought a one-way bus ticket with no return plan. The bus smelled like fries and sunburn. I stared out the window while the towns got smaller and the fields got longer. We passed a beat-up gas station, a line of irrigation pipes, and a dead deer on the shoulder before we finally stopped in front of a general store with a soda cooler out front and a corkboard full of lost cat flyers and garage sale signs. The driver nodded at me. "Last stop, bud." I stepped off with my duffel and boots. Nothing else. The house sat a mile back off a gravel road, tucked behind a bent gate half swallowed by weeds. The roof was sun-warped, porch sagging like a drunk's shoulders, with one shutter clinging on by a rusted hinge. Off to the left was a kennel building, the kind you'd expect to find in some washed-up racetrack town. It was its own thing. Fenced, faded paint, metal water bowls dry as dust. I noticed the brass plate on the kennel post, dull and green in the corners. It said, "Caretaker Covenant, see Deed Book 31, page 183. That was when it clicked. This wasn't just a dump. This was something my dad had set up, buried under old paperwork, but legal. Before I could figure out what to make of it, a man waved from the gravel lane. Late 60s, maybe early 70s, stiff gait, faded flannel tucked into worn jeans. He had a limp that made every step look like a question mark. "You Martin?" he asked. "Yeah, I guess so." "Harlan Reed," he said, offering a handshake. "Been watching the place. Your dad paid me a little something each month to keep it from falling in." He didn't talk like a guy who worshipped Richard Murphy, just a man doing his job. He nodded toward the kennel. "Come on, let me show you something." She was waiting just inside the first stall, sleek gray coat, long snout, calm eyes that tracked every move. She stood slow, one rear leg shaky, and then stepped forward like she owned the place. "That's Pogo," Harlan said. "Used to be a star. Took a bad step last year. Still got spring, though. Knows her commands, knows her people. She's just been waiting for one." "Why's she still here?" I asked. "Your dad bought her on a dare. Some story about outbidding a guy from Reno. Parked her here like a trophy. Barely checked on her." I stepped inside the stall, knelt down, and said her name once. "Pogo." She walked right up and leaned her head into my chest like she'd been waiting 10 years just to do that. That did something to me. Didn't matter if I was bitter or broke. That dog chose me. Inside the house was another story. Busted legs on the chairs, black mold creeping on the windowsills, mouse droppings near the pantry, and beer bottles in corners like someone had used the place as a hideout. But the bones were there, thick beams, real wood, not the fake veneer junk. I opened every window, dragged the trash bags out, and swept until dark. I slept on a bare mattress with my boots still on, one arm draped across the duffel, the other over a rusted crowbar I found behind the stove. At sunrise, I heard footsteps on the porch. I stepped outside ready to fight if I had to. Instead, I saw a woman about my age holding a casserole dish, with a small kid ducking behind her leg like he wasn't sure if I was real or just another rumor. She held the dish out without a word. "Megan Sanders. I live across the creek. This is Otis. He's 4 and believes everyone with boots is a cowboy." Otis peeked around her jeans, stared at me, then looked past me and saw Pogo stretching in the yard. "Can I pet your dog?" he asked. "She picks who she lets," I said. Pogo didn't hesitate. She walked straight up to Otis, sat, and waited. He touched her muzzle with both hands like he was handling something holy. Megan smiled and handed me the dish. Green bean casserole, real onions, not the crunchy fake kind. You look like you need it. I didn't argue. I just nodded and held the door open. Megan didn't ask for permission to help. She just started showing up. Next morning, she handed me a grocery sack full of basics: peanut butter, coffee, paper towels, ibuprofen. "Figure you're still learning where the store is," she said, and I was. I thanked her like a guy who wasn't used to anything being handed over without strings. Otis tugged her shirt with one hand and pointed at Pogo with the other. "Can I pet the fast dog again?" "Ask first," Megan said, but Pogo was already trotting over, tail twitching, nose in his palm. She'd picked him, that was plain. He gave her a crooked smile and said, "She smells like toast," which somehow made sense. We sat on the porch steps while Otis tried to braid a stick into Pogo's fur. Megan leaned back on her hands and said, "I got pregnant at 15. Guy from my chem class. His parents moved 3 towns over when I wouldn't end it." She shrugged. "Had Otis at 16. Got my GED and started working at the dollar store. Wasn't pretty, but it's clean now." I didn't know what to say, so I said what I meant. "He's a good kid." "Yeah," she said. "He's mine. That helps." Harlan showed up later with a toolbox and a roll of tar paper. We patched roof shingles and reset a door frame in the back room. The man didn't talk much, but he worked smooth, steady, with a limp that made me slow down to match his rhythm. He didn't apologize for the limp and didn't explain it either, just moved with it, like it was part of the job. Pogo followed us around like a supervisor. She knew heel, down, and wait, and she did this awkward little hop every time Otis laughed, like his joy triggered something old in her bones. She stole one of my socks and buried it under the porch like a prize. Every time I reached for it, she'd roll on her back like we were wrestling for gold. Harlan watched her walk, saw the way she avoided putting pressure on that back leg. "Twisted on a gopher hole last year," he said. "Not catastrophic, but she never got the follow-up. People promised things, then forgot." Megan came by that night with chili and a solution. "There's a vet I know. Works dogs, not cats in dresses. You want a second look? She's it." Her name was Chloe Watson, 26, lean build, firm hands, ball cap pulled down low. She showed up 2 days later in a dusty Tacoma, stepped out holding a notepad and a thermos, and got straight to it. "Let her walk," she said. I did. Pogo limped, tried to mask it, failed. Chloe crouched, felt tendons, moved the leg slowly and said, "She's got range, but you gotta play smart. This isn't just fetch rehab." She gave me a whole schedule: stretching, icing, short straight runs, no corners, no tight turns, no hero stuff. Pogo didn't love it. She wanted to run full speed on day 3. Chloe shook her head and said, "Win the long game or don't play at all." I started getting up early to stretch Pogo's leg with a towel, hold it at certain angles, massage the muscle like Chloe showed me. It was weird at first, then it started to make sense. Every time she pushed too hard, we iced. Every time she did it right, I gave her half a carrot. Turns out she liked those more than jerky. One afternoon while we were working the back steps, a white SUV pulled up, and out stepped a guy with a clean shave and a badge on his belt. Tyson Roberts, county detective, sheriff's office. He carried a tow chain coiled over one shoulder and said, "Harlan around?" "He's inside," I said. Chloe was crouched beside Pogo, checking her knee. Tyson handed over the chain and stuck around longer than he had to. Said something about the sunset looking like barbecue sauce. Chloe rolled her eyes but didn't walk away. I caught the glance between them, half challenge, half invitation. They had a story already or were about to start one. Megan came back a few nights later. No dish this time, just ideas. "Your clothesline's gonna pull the whole siding off in a month," she said. "You need better anchors." "Didn't get to that yet," I told her. "I know. That's why I'm here." She walked around the side and started pointing. 2 screws here, tension pole there. Done. She moved like she'd done it all before. Otis followed her with a plastic wrench, handing it to her every few steps like she was on a crew, and he was the foreman. We built days like that. Quiet, steady, no big declarations. I learned how to fix a screen door and replace cracked tile. Harlan gave me lessons without saying much. Sometimes just a nod, sometimes a grunted nope when I was doing it wrong. But every time I did it right, he let me finish. Nights I sat on the porch with a cold can and watched the tree line go soft. I'd count what I had. a dog who trusted me, a roof that didn't leak where I slept, and 2 neighbors who treated me like more than a write-off. Sometimes I'd glance at Harlan as he walked Pogo slow along the gravel and think he was watching me like he'd seen something turn that needed turning. He'd pat Pogo's head, look at me and say, "Kid, don't rush it." He always said it the same way, like it wasn't just about dogs or doors or healing legs. It stuck. The words kept circling my head as I walked out to the shed with a box of screws, thinking I'd find Harlan sharpening something or muttering about a hinge I'd installed crooked. The sun was already brutal that Thursday, burning through the tin roof and turning the dust into a thin fog. I pushed the shed door open with my boot, ready to ask him about a warped board on the porch rail, and saw him sitting in his chair like he'd just leaned back for a breather. Something was wrong before I even touched him. His right hand rested on his knee, fingers relaxed, and his chin was tilted like he'd been looking toward the door when I walked up. I stepped closer, called his name, shook his shoulder once. Nothing. His face looked peaceful, not slack or twisted, just finished, like he'd exhaled something he'd been holding for years. I checked for a pulse anyway. I wasn't stupid. I just wasn't ready. When I lifted his shirt pocket, I noticed a little fold of paper tucked inside. My name was written across it in shaky pen. I opened it with my thumb. "Martin, I regret a lot, mostly not knowing you sooner. H." I didn't know what to make of that line. I didn't know what it meant or why it hit me in the gut. But it did. We buried him 2 days later on the hill by the walnut tree, under the same shade where he'd sit in the afternoons and watch Pogo limp her slow circles. A handful of neighbors showed up in work boots and Sunday shirts. Chloe stood beside Tyson, her hand tucked into his like she'd done it a dozen times before. Otis asked loud enough for everyone to hear, "Does Mr. Harlan get a sky house now?" And Megan told him yes, he earned a good one. I shoveled dirt until my arms shook. The next week, someone convinced me to take Pogo to a training night at a low-rent straight track outside of town. It smelled like smoke, spilled beer, and diesel. Men leaned against chain-link fences shouting bets that made no sense. Cash at the gate, no questions. Pogo pressed against my leg, alert but calm, like she smelled the trouble before I did. A handler with a thick neck and mirrored shades walked straight up, grabbed Pogo's collar and said, "Dog like this needs a hard opener after that layoff." I yanked her back and told him to keep his hands off. He snorted. Soft handler, soft dog. I stepped toward him, ready to put a hand in his chest, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Touch that dog again and I'll shut this whole place down." Chloe walked in like a storm, ball cap low, jaw set. "Where's the track boss?" she asked. "I want the heat distance, and it's going to be short." I blinked at her. "Megan texted me," she said, checking Pogo's tendon with quick fingers. "She said you were doing something stupid. She wasn't wrong." We ended up signing for a single, shortened heat under her eyes. Any strain and she'd pull us. The boss didn't like it, but the sight of Tyson's truck near the gate, he'd followed Chloe, kept him polite. At the line, Pogo crouched like she was remembering a life she'd paused, not lost. The box snapped open, and she exploded forward, no hesitation. She hammered the mid, body flat, legs smooth, and finished half a driveway ahead of a dog built like a tank. When she slowed down, she shook like it had all just been a goofy warm-up. A couple guys clapped, a couple looked annoyed. Pogo came back to me panting hard but proud. I knelt and rubbed her shoulder. Good girl, real good. The track boss walked over and gave me a grin that made my skin crawl. Dog like that, we could keep a piece of her, start running her steady, cut you in. "I'm not giving you anything," I said. "We're done here." Chloe stepped up beside me. He said no. That means no. Tyson stood 10 feet behind us pretending to scroll his phone, but I saw him snapping quiet pictures anytime someone raised a voice. We left the track with dust in our teeth and adrenaline still shaking around inside me. Otis rode home in Megan's car and fed Pogo carrot coins from the back seat. "She's fast because she's smart," he said. "She knows where the wind goes." I believed him. It sounded childish, but true in a way grown-ups forget how to say. By the time we got home, the night was thick and cold. Megan carried Otis to bed. Chloe gave me one more look at Pogo's leg and told me we'd survived the test but weren't out of the woods. Tyson said he'd have a conversation with the county about shutting down that place, then drove off with a wave. I went inside, kicked off my boots, and set my hat on the nightstand. Harlan's note slipped out of the band and landed on the wood. I picked it up, read it again, and felt something shift in the back of my chest. I didn't know why a few scratched words could burn a hole in me, but they did. I slid the note under my hat and lay back on the mattress. Pogo dropped beside me with a grunt and put her head on my thigh. Sleep didn't come easy, but when it did, I dreamed of Harlan sitting under the walnut tree, looking at me like he finally recognized something he'd been waiting on. Tyson didn't say anything at first. He looked at the envelope, looked at me, then slid it across the desk like he didn't want to open it either. "I already did," I said. "It's clean. Chain of custody, sealed properly, 2 samples, 2 names." He nodded, slow. "You want to make a formal statement?" "Not yet," I said. "I just needed someone to know." I left his office before the walls closed in and drove around for 30 minutes with the windows down, music off, and the radio static low enough to feel like company. I ended up back at the farm without remembering how I got there. Pogo met me at the porch like she could smell what had shifted. She bumped her head into my thigh and sat without needing a command. A couple days before all this, after a legit track meet in Modesto, where Pogo ran clean and took third, I'd pocketed $380 in prize and met a silver-haired guy leaning on the rail. Looked like somebody's retired shop teacher until he clapped my hand like an old friend. "Harry Griffin," he said. "Me and your old man spun more barrels than the law should allow." He had that voice, friendly, gruff, soaked in nostalgia. I didn't stop him. Didn't correct him when he started telling stories about my dad like I was his mirror. Halfway through a memory about a fishing trip, he paused, squinted at the track, then said, "Funny thing, back when your folks were trying, Richard told me the doctor said he was shooting blanks, couldn't have kids. Then boom, you and your brother show up. World's funny that way." My jaw locked so tight it made my ears ring. I smiled, nodded, said thanks, and walked Pogo all the way to the end of the lot, like I was chasing calm. Back at the house, Jake had left a surprise, drove out just to drop a 6-pack in the fridge and leave a spent cigarette in the ashtray of my truck. Later that night, he texted me a picture of new rims with the caption, "How's the mud life treating you?" I didn't reply. First time I didn't even feel the urge to. I picked that cigarette butt up with tweezers, sealed it in a sandwich bag, then plucked a couple hairs off the headrest and drove across county lines to a clinic where no one knew my face. Paid in cash. Asked what matched what. Listened while a nurse walked me through the paperwork like it was no big deal. Back home, I kept busy. Ran Pogo short straights, no corners, just clean heat on a dirt path we packed ourselves. Chloe watched our sessions with her usual clinical focus, tapping her pen against her leg and saying things like, "You're a quick study. Not sure if I should be impressed or worried." I smirked, but didn't tell her what was running wild through my head. I iced Pogo's leg like she was the only thing still steady. Megan brought Otis over almost every other day. He started what he called couch races, scooting across the rug like a rocket while Pogo galloped beside him at half speed. When they crashed at the end, he'd shout, "We tied!" even though she clearly held back. Megan stood in the doorway one night laughing so hard she wiped tears off her cheeks with the hem of her shirt. "I haven't seen him this happy in a long time," she said, voice soft like it might snap. "Dog makes things better," I told her. It was all I could say without letting more out. The DNA results came in on a Wednesday. I didn't open them inside the clinic. Just walked out, sat on a bench near the parking lot, tore the seal, and read it twice. 0% relation. Not brothers, not cousins, not step anything. Just strangers born to the same lie. I stared at the paper like it might catch fire. I didn't cry, didn't rage. My chest just felt hollow, like my whole rib cage had caved in and nobody noticed. I drove straight to Tyson's office, walked in, and asked for someone who wouldn't blow me off. They gave me him again. He sat up straighter this time. "This change anything for you?" I slid the file across. "It's clean. No mix-up. My name's on one, Jake's on the other. They don't match. You want to pursue it?" "I don't know what I want yet," I said. "But I'm not pretending it didn't happen." He nodded, opened a drawer, and pulled out a legal pad. "If you're ready, I'll log it." "Not yet," I said again. "But you'll be the first when I am." That night, Megan made meatloaf, and we ate on the porch with paper plates and cold sweet tea. Otis climbed into the hammock with Pogo and started humming a made-up song about flying cars and carrot snacks. I watched them for a minute, then looked over at Megan. "What would you do if you found out your whole family was a lie?" She didn't flinch. "I'd build a new one, and I'd make absolutely sure it was better." Simple words, but they hit like a sledge. Later, while brushing down Pogo's coat, I ran my thumb along her spine and whispered, "We don't owe them anything." She blinked slow, that same calm she gave me the first day, like she already knew where this road was heading. Tyson didn't blink once while I talked. Just listened, jaw tight, not even writing. When I finished laying it out, DNA, Griffin's comment, the envelope, the clinic, he asked, "You want this opened up?" I said yes. He slid a consent form across the desk. I signed without reading it. I left the DNA copy with him and walked out with the window down, wind punching through the cab like I'd cracked the seal on something old and sour. 2 days later, Murphy Cellars went sideways. Quality assurance flagged a high-yield blend, some reserve label run that had rushed through cleaning protocols. An unapproved additive from one of Jake's off-book suppliers tainted the whole lot. Internal malpractice, not sabotage, not corporate espionage, just corner-cutting and good old-fashioned kickbacks. Loss estimate came in around $120,000. 10 minutes of bottling, a month of cleanup, and Jake's name attached to every file. The board scrambled like rats off a hot plank, feeding lines to the press about isolated supplier misconduct and minor procedural breakdowns. But the footage told a different story. Jake on camera, pale, sweaty, collar tugged down like it was choking him. He looked small, like a high school kid caught cheating with the test still in his hand. Tyson called me that night. "No outside hit," he said. "It was sloppy controls. Buddy kickback loop. That's it." I didn't feel good about it. Didn't feel bad either. Just tired. I texted Jake. "Diner, Route 11, 10 o'clock. Don't make me chase you." He showed. Hands shaking, hoodie sleeves rolled up like he couldn't decide if he wanted to punch something or confess. He paced the lot twice before sliding into the booth across from me. "He set me up," he said. "That supplier. Guy I went to college with. Said he could get the blend out faster, smoother. I let him run with it because I was busy doing tequila shots with a bottle girl in Tahoe." I stirred my coffee. "So you just signed off?" "I didn't check the logs. I didn't double up on QA. I just assumed." He stopped, bit the inside of his cheek, and exhaled. I screwed it. No way to pretty it. It was the first time he used my name without smirking. "I'm sorry, Marty," he said. I believed him. Not all the way, but enough to let him keep talking. Tyson took Jake's statement the next morning, logged everything, and followed the paper trail until it curled right back to that shady vendor and the thin invoice chain Jake thought would slide through unnoticed. After that, Tyson asked me to come back in. He shut the door, locked it, and set a folder in front of me without saying a word. "I've been working channels," he said. "Narrow family court requests. County DA's office authorized discreet pulls. Didn't want to move until I had confirmation." He opened the folder and laid out the kind of mess that makes your stomach roll. A birth certificate with a doctored seal. Hospital records that didn't match. A private placement adoption, never finalized in open court, signed by a physician who got his license pulled for falsified consents in 2 other counties. Vicky's name was on every page, every dotted line, every signature forged to keep it sealed. Richard wasn't even the petitioner. He just signed off once the mess was cleaned up. They paid to erase the beginning, Tyson said, calm and even. Didn't go through the state system. They made it look private, off the books, so no one could contest later. My throat closed. Pogo pressed her head against my knee like she knew exactly what was happening without hearing a word. Your mother filed these when you were a week old. You were taken from another couple, rerouted into a sealed adoption through a paper doctor. No biological disclosure. What they did wouldn't hold up now. Even then, it's legally rotten. What happens next? I asked. I'll tell you what doesn't, Tyson said. You don't get buried under it. That's not going to happen. The records are real, and if you want it, we can bring it all above water. I nodded, but the weight of it didn't move. It just settled into my spine like bricks packed wet. That weekend, Jake showed up at the farm with 2 full grocery bags, a rusty toolbox, and the kind of look people wear after a long, bad dream. He stood next to the pump house and cleared his throat. I want to fix the pressure line. I saw it dripping last time I was here. I didn't answer right away. He stared at his boots. I owe somebody in this world something, he said, and it sure isn't the wine club. I opened the door to the pump shed and stepped back. Tools are already inside. He didn't say thank you. I didn't either. We worked quiet. I handed him a wrench when he needed it, watched him fight with the intake valve, watched him bleed at the knuckle and not curse about it. For once, he wasn't selling anything. Later, he leaned against the wall with grease on his hands and said, I thought I had everything figured out, man. I thought I was the next Richard Murphy. You were, I said. That's the problem. He barked a short laugh, no humor in it. Yeah, guess it is. I didn't care if we were related. I didn't care if we ever were. That day, I saw him drop the act, and that was enough to let him keep standing on my land. Jake had just finished fixing the pump house when Tyson's truck pulled into the gravel. Chloe rode shotgun. Both of them stepped out slow, like they'd rehearsed this ride in their heads the whole way over. They walked up to the porch without a word. Pogo stood up, didn't bark, just watched them both like she knew the wind had shifted. I stepped out and nodded once. Didn't offer a chair. Didn't need to. Tyson rubbed his palms together, not out of nerves, just habit. Then he said it plain. Martin, your biological father was Harlan Reed. The words didn't land all at once. It was like a slow swing to the gut. The walnut tree out back, the one with Harlan's name carved on a board nailed to its trunk, suddenly looked foreign, like I'd seen it my whole life through a screen and now the glass had cracked. I didn't say anything. I just sat down hard on the porch rail. Back then, Harlan would have been 41, old enough to have a decent job, young enough to screw things up. Tyson opened the folder in his hand and handed me one photo first. Harlan in his 20s, standing beside a girl with dark hair and eyes shaped like mine. They weren't smiling, just staring into the camera like they didn't trust the world to treat them fair. He laid out more. Payroll records from a steel plant near the river, W-2 forms with Harlan's name, and a court petition from the early 2000s. The man had tried, filed for reinstatement of parental rights. The petition got denied. They were your parents, Martin, Tyson said. The placement wasn't just fast, it was forced. Murphy money cleaned their medical debt and a few old warrants from Harlan's brother. In exchange, rights were signed. Quietly. No appeal path. Paper doctor made it look legal enough. Chloe kept her hand on Tyson's arm the whole time, like she was holding him in place more than comforting herself. He didn't flinch. He just looked at me and let the silence do its work. Richard wanted a son, Tyson added. When the doctors told him it wasn't going to happen, he let the lie wrap around him and called it family. I stood up, walked off the porch, then turned and walked right back. My hands were shaking. I didn't even notice until Chloe offered me a bottle of water. I didn't take it. I needed the shake. You're sure? I asked. Absolutely, Tyson said. DNA, court records, timeline, it's all tight. I pulled Harlan's old note from my wallet. The line about wishing he'd found me sooner scraped across my ribs like a match head. He was here the whole time, I muttered. That night, Megan tucked Otis into bed early and joined me on the steps. She didn't ask questions, just sat next to me with her arms around her knees. Pogo sprawled between us, tail thumping against the boards every few minutes. I didn't speak for almost an hour. When I did, all I said was, "He was right here. I looked him in the eye for months and didn't know." Megan leaned into my shoulder. "He knew," she said. "That note says he knew." A week later, we set a stone next to Harlan's marker under the walnut tree. It was small and plain, just his name, Army unit, and birth and death years, plus a second stone beneath it that simply said, "He stayed." I stood there with my hand on the bark while everyone else came and went. Told him about Pogo's last time trial, about Otis's obsession with dinosaur jokes, about Megan learning how to can tomatoes. I didn't cry, but my throat locked up until my jaw ached. Chloe came up beside me near the end, eyes red, face soft. She didn't say much. Tyson put an arm around her shoulders, held her there while she blinked hard. Somewhere in all that mess, those two had turned into something solid. And it fit. Jake showed up last, hands jammed in his coat pockets. No loud entrance. Just a slow walk across the grass and a box in his hand. He knelt by the stone and pulled out a wrench set, used, scratched up, but cleaned like it mattered. He set it under the tree and stood back. "He taught me to fix a gate once," Jake said, voice low. "Didn't laugh when I got it wrong. Just handed me the tool again." I nodded but didn't say anything. He was trying. I wasn't going to spit on that. We didn't talk about who Jake's real father was. That was his to ask, not mine to dig into. I'd had my storm, and it already shook the roots out. When we walked back down the hill, I felt like a man who'd just been pulled apart and put back together with new screws. They didn't match the original frame, but maybe that was the point. From that day on, the farm started pulling itself upright, board by board, like it had been waiting on someone steady. We put new tin on the shed, wide enough to hear the rain, but tight enough to keep it off the gear. Megan planted herbs in tire beds along the south fence. Basil, mint, rosemary, stuff she used without fuss, just snipped and tossed into dinner like it grew by accident. Tyson's buddy brought his grader by one Saturday and cleared the lane smooth, evened the dips, dragged gravel until it looked like a place people wanted to come down, not turn away from. Pogo kept grinding. First, she came in 2 seconds off the top dogs at sanctioned meets. Clean runs, no bobbles, just not quite fast enough. Then she shaved it to a second, then to half. Chloe called her metronome smooth, like every stride hit the same drumbeat. Every check we earned, 610 here, 540 there, we rolled straight back into the place. New kennel floor, better drainage, running chute with rubber cleats so she could open up without risk. Otis made a sticker chart on the fridge, put stars next to every event, and handed out his own awards made of paper plates and glue. He started calling himself assistant coach and took it serious enough to wear a whistle around his neck. Jake brought over a walk-behind tiller with chipped paint and a fence charger still wrapped in its box. Paid for both himself. Part-time job with a regional distributor. Real hours, real sweat. He looked tired, which honestly made him look better. Less fake shine, more grit. The winery mess didn't stop with the spoiled batch. Tyson kept pulling thread, and eventually the warehouse manager cracked. Flipped under pressure and gave up the dummy vendor scheme they'd been running. Fake suppliers, inflated invoices, payouts funneled through burner LLCs. Jake testified. Didn't dodge, didn't spin it. Just stood there and owned it. Said he'd ignored what he knew because it felt easier. The board cut him loose but spared him the worst. Repayment plan, oversight, and a permanent blacklist on vendor approvals. No more friends in purchasing, one board member said. Jake nodded like he deserved it. Vicky didn't get that kind of mercy. She got charged for the old forged records and a couple newer ones tied to financial filings she'd touched without right. She called twice, once in the morning, once after dark. I let both ring out. I didn't need her voice in my head anymore. She'd already written herself out. One night, just after sunset, I sat on the porch rail with a small ring in my palm. No box, no speech, just the question. Megan was barefoot, wiping her hands on a towel after making dinner. I looked over and said, "Can you picture a life that's not fancy, but it's steady?" She laughed and didn't even blink. "I've been living it with you already." That was her yes. Chloe and Tyson didn't waste time pretending. They'd been circling each other since that day on the porch with the folder in his lap. Now they held hands without flinching and talked about a double wedding like it was already scheduled. "Under the walnut," Chloe said. "Next summer." "Barbecue and short dresses," Megan added. "No gowns, no drama." Otis heard all of it and declared himself best man before anyone else could claim it. He drew a wedding map with crayon paths and labeled the seating by snack availability. We filed paperwork to give Otis the option to take my last name when he wanted. No pressure, no ceremony, just a line on a form, signed and tucked away. In the meantime, we gave him a second toothbrush and a real big boy bed at my place. I started calling at our place after that. I stopped checking my phone for anything from the old house. Not texts, not emails, not calendar updates for some event I never asked to be part of. That part of my head got quiet. Not empty, just quiet. Sometimes I'd walk through the shed with Harlan's tools still on their nails, still where he left them. And I'd think, "We're keeping it up, old man. You started this, and we're carrying it now." Then I'd hear Otis yell something ridiculous from the yard. "Pogo's faster than a T-Rex," and Megan laughing while she hosed off her boots, and it would all settle into place like it was meant to. The county championship didn't feel like any race we'd run before. You could hear it before you saw it. Loud talkers, money voices, handlers shouting over announcers, the occasional mic check popping through the speakers. Sanctioned officials wore real jackets, not hoodies. Clipboards, radios, walkie chatter. Payout was high enough to matter. Everyone came hungry. Chloe walked the edge of the warm-up track with her arms crossed tight. I saw it in her face before she said a word. "This track smells off," she said, sniffing toward the back stretch. "Right past the turn. Like chemical powder and wet grass had a fight." I walked it myself, slow, head down. Halfway through, I crouched and pinched some of the top dust between my fingers. It looked like regular dirt, but it felt slick, like soap ground into sand. Wrong texture, wrong temperature. My gut twisted. Somebody tried to rig the run. Not for us, for their own dog. Probably laced that section to throw off stride or make it stick. I looked at Chloe. "You think they're trying to spike our lane?" She pointed with her boot. "Right where Pogo puts down hard. If she slips there, she doesn't recover." Tyson was already walking the edge near the vendor tents. Chloe flagged him with a hard wave. He jogged over, no clipboard, just the badge clipped to his belt and a "don't screw with this" face. She didn't bother easing into it. "Dust on the back stretch. Pogo's lane. It's not right." Tyson pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and showed me video he'd already caught. Grainy dawn footage of a guy in a red ball cap tossing powder from a Ziploc while his buddy acted lookout. Tyson muttered, "Knew I saw something off earlier. Been watching them since setup." He didn't wait. Walked straight to the steward, played the clip, and pointed toward the far tent. By the time a track cop crossed the infield, the buddy was gone, but the guy in the red cap froze like someone had pulled his plug. The steward barked orders into his walkie. The start got delayed. The back stretch got raked and soaked. The crowd booed like kids denied recess. Chloe stayed by my side the whole time, muttering tendon checks and stretch sequences like she was trying to keep from swinging on someone. I didn't let go of Pogo's leash, kept walking her in tight loops. Otis followed, full of questions. Why are the men mad? Why's the machine spraying the dirt? Are raptors faster than dogs? I knelt beside him and said, "Only one way to find out, but you gotta cheer like it's the finals." He saluted me. Yes, sir, coach. Gate time. Sun sharp overhead. Chloe checked Pogo's legs one last time, tapped the flank, and stepped back with a nod. The gates popped. Pogo broke clean, straight line, head low, stride even. For the first 20 yards, she ran shoulder to shoulder with the favorite, a lean brindle who'd clocked firsts in 3 straight meets. I counted her steps under my breath. She shifted at the back stretch, same spot they'd tried to poison with powder. But it held. Clean ground. Chloe's rake crew had done their job. Her rhythm stayed true. Then she slid half a head forward, then a full head. She didn't look back, didn't slow. Crossed the finish 2 lengths ahead, tail high like it was her own proud flag. Otis screamed loud enough to pop eardrums. Megan wiped her eyes, laughing through the tears. Chloe shouted something I couldn't even hear, her fist in the air, badge lanyard swinging around her neck. I dropped to one knee, grabbed Pogo by the collar, pressed my forehead to hers and said, "That's our second chance, girl. You took it and ran." Behind us, the red cap trainer tried to disappear into the crowd, head low, hands in his vest. Tyson and a track officer met him at the tunnel. I didn't even have to watch. I knew it was handled. The steward stepped onto the announcer stand and made it official. Permanent ban for tampering. Payout stood. That night someone took a photo of us right after the race. Me still in the dirt, knees stained, Pogo licking the sweat off my jaw. I was grinning like an idiot. It's still the only photo of me I've ever liked. Court didn't feel like justice. It felt like sitting in a cold room where the coffee tasted like metal and time wouldn't move. The clock on the wall ticked like it was mocking everybody. Vicky sat with her lawyer and didn't look over. Didn't cry. Didn't ask for anything. She took a plea on the forged adoption records and a couple of newer charges tied to financial paperwork she had no business touching. Prosecutors said the statute clock had paused due to ongoing concealment. Legal speak for you don't get to hide the body and then say time ran out. There were no cameras, no orange jumpsuit, no headline meltdown. Just fines, probation, and the slow collapse of a woman who had nothing left to spin. Whatever she'd been performing dried up, and there was nothing underneath. The judge looked right at her and said, "Human lives are not assets. No amount of comfort justifies irreparable harm." He said it slow, like he meant it. I didn't clap, I didn't flinch, I didn't even look for her eyes. That part of me was done. The wine board put out its own statement a week later. They named names. The warehouse manager who ran the dummy vendor scheme got fired and charged. Jake had to stand in front of the partners and read a statement of accountability. No speech, just facts. He didn't run from it, and he didn't dress it up. That mattered more than the check he wrote afterward. Tyson closed the tampering case at the track. The red cap trainer got banned for life and booked on a tampering charge. The steward asked if I had anything to say to the cameras. I said, "Run straight, or step off the track." That was the first time I said something that wasn't about surviving. That was about standing. Paperwork showed up a few weeks later. Official deeds, stamped and sealed. The farmhouse, the kennel, and a chunk of creek bank were legally mine. Turns out Richard had tied the kennel parcel to a caretaker covenant that ran with the land. It vested in whoever got that parcel under his will. Even his lawyers couldn't unravel it. On paper, I'd been a placeholder. Now I was permanent. We picked a day under the walnut tree for the weddings. 1 ceremony, 2 couples. Megan chose daisies and barbecue. Chloe wore a short dress and boots. Tyson brought a big old speaker system that could outplay the frogs. We hung fairy lights between the branches, but it didn't look cutesy. It looked earned. Jake stood beside me as best man, hair combed, shoulders squared. He handed Otis the rings, both tied to a carabiner on his belt. Otis nearly dropped one in the grass, but yelled, "Coach, save!" before it hit the dirt. Pogo nosed it right to my boot like she'd been waiting for her moment. We kept the vows short. No fairy tale junk. Just promises you could build fence posts out of. I looked across the yard and saw everything I didn't know I wanted. A woman who showed up every day, a kid who laughed with his whole belly, a dog who ran when it counted, and a brother who finally stopped pretending. The people who tried to cut me out were nowhere. Not gone, just left behind. No revenge speeches, no torches, just silence. And that was louder than anything I could have shouted. The payback was this life, staying here, living honest, winning in the open. Every time Pogo thumped her tail and leaned into my knee, I felt that note in my pocket again. Martin, I regret a lot. Mostly not knowing you sooner. Well, we got our moment, old man. We used it. Before you head out, let me ask something honest. If you were in my boots, would you have stayed and built a new life, or walked away? If you've got hype, tap it to help this story reach more people, and please subscribe and hit like because it really helps us grow. Drop a quick comment too, even just good story or your own take. Love you guys.